I was born on a wind-swept autumn afternoon in the small seaside town of Port Willow. From the moment I drew my first breath, I sensed that my place in the Reynolds family would be one of quiet endurance rather than loud celebration. My father, Harrison Marlowe, worked as the guidance counsellor at our local high school, and my mother, Beatrice, was a critical care nurse at Port Willow Regional Hospital. They provided a home brimming with love, but whenever our extended kin gathered, whether for birthdays, holidays, or the annual family reunion, it felt as though we were mere spectators to their grand parade. My Aunt Celeste, my father's elder sister, had married into the Wellington shipping dynasty and lived in a sprawling estate on Lake Wellington. Her husband, Everett Wellington, owned half a dozen freighters, and their opulent waterfront home was the stage for countless soirees. Their children, Miranda and Jasper, embodied every expectation of family greatness. Miranda studied law at Wellington Academy, and Jasper completed his internship at a corporate consultancy in Auckland. When they spoke, every sentence became a demonstration of privilege. When I attempted to share my own interests, I was met with polite nods and perfunctory praise, as though my passion for the hospitality world were nothing more than a child's pastime. Yet even as a little girl, I dreamed beyond Port Willow's weathered boardwalks and misty docks. At the age of 12, I volunteered at a local bed and breakfast called Crestwood Inn, sweeping floors, folding linens, and setting tables. I listened intently as the owner described her philosophy, that a hotel stay was more than a roof over one's head. It was an experience worth savouring. Every antique dresser and every embroidered pillow carried its own story. I absorbed those stories like water in parched soil. But whenever I mentioned my fascination over the family dinner table, Aunt Celeste would pat my hand and say, "Darling, one day you'll outgrow these quaint dreams. You need a career that truly matters." Her words stung, but they failed to extinguish the spark she intended to snuff out. Following high school, I enrolled at Southern Shores University to study business management. Financing my tuition meant juggling part-time jobs, from waiting tables at a seafood restaurant to working the night shift at Crestwood Inn. It was grueling work. I scrubbed bathrooms until my hands cracked, manned the front desk through midnight check-ins, and learned basic maintenance tasks like resetting circuit breakers and patching drywall. Each sunrise brought a choice: remain at home and indulge in self-pity, or step outside into a world of endless possibility. I chose the latter every single day. It was during my time at Crestwood that I crossed paths with Raymond Bennett, a veteran hotel executive visiting from New Zealand. One stormy evening, a semi-truck jackknifed on the coastal highway, stranding a busload of convention guests. While chaos unfolded, I calmly arranged alternate lodging among several neighbouring inns and coordinated shuttle buses down flooded side roads. Late that night, I found Raymond outside the front doors, soaked to the bone and rattled. I offered him a dry towel and a cup of coffee. He looked at me, rain dripping from his broad shoulders, and said, "You have a gift, Lydia. It takes more than training to see hospitality as art. You understand that instinctively." His words lodged in my heart, giving me both purpose and validation. Under Raymond's mentorship, I advanced rapidly. First, I became assistant manager, then general manager at increasingly prestigious properties. I mastered revenue forecasting, guest relations, event planning, and amenity curation. Wherever I worked, I immersed myself in every operational detail, from negotiating with linen suppliers to collaborating with local artisans for spa treatments. When Raymond founded Pacific Crest Hospitality Group, he invited me to join as his protégé. He offered me the chance to invest my life savings in the renovation of Tatewood Manor, a crumbling Victorian cliffside estate overlooking the Tasman Sea. I hesitated only briefly before committing. The renovation nearly consumed me. I negotiated historic preservation standards by day and orchestrated carpenters and stonemasons by night. But when we cut the ribbon at the grand reopening 18 months later, the manor's restored mahogany beams and hand-blown glass chandeliers gleamed with a triumph I had never known. That first success transformed my trajectory. In the following years, I acquired 2 more properties, Moonhaven Lodge in the Alpine Forests and Coral Crest Retreat on Golden Sands, and united them under the banner of Serene Shores Collection. Each property celebrated its local character, driftwood furniture, Maori-inspired spa rituals, and farm-to-table cuisine that showcased regional artisans. Guests flocked to us for authentic luxury experiences, and industry publications took notice. Now, at the age of 34, I possessed both the confidence and the means to claim my crowning achievement, Lake Serene Resort, a 5-star mountain retreat once owned by an aristocratic family until financial woes forced its sale. The acquisition slipped quietly into the pages of trade journals, but outside the hospitality world it barely registered. Perfect, I thought. No fanfare, no inflated egos, just the opportunity to complete my collection and to arrange one last test. Soon, the Reynolds family group message lit up my phone. Annual reunion at Lake Serene Resort, they announced. Little did they know this resort belonged to me. I would arrive undercover, armed with 2 key cards, one for a humble lakeside cottage, the other for the presidential suite in the tower. Over the next few days, I would bear their dismissive remarks, their assumptions about my station, but I would also witness how they treated my staff and my vision. And then, in the right moment, I would reveal the truth. I would finally show them who I had become. I watched the group chat light up as though the resort's welcome marquee had been switched on just for my relatives. Family reunion at Lake Serene Resort in late July, my cousin Miranda announced, punctuating her message with a string of heart emojis. Jasper chimed in immediately. Can't wait to show off my new promotion. 3rd year as junior partner already. Who's ready for luxury? Even Aunt Celeste contributed. Remember to pack appropriately. Lake Serene is 5-star elegance from dawn to dusk. Business casual minimum at dinner. Their tone dripped with assumed superiority, as if I, Lydia Marlowe, could never belong in such gilded company. I smiled thinly at my phone and typed, "Count me in, looking forward to seeing everyone." Then, I slipped the device into my pocket and touched the velvet-lined envelope in my bag that contained the presidential suite key. As far as my family knew, I'd reserved just one of the rustic boathouse cottages, my humble retreat I planned to claim at check-in. Meanwhile, I would circulate among them incognito for the first 2 days, observing how they treated the staff and the property. 2 weeks before the reunion, I convened a private meeting with my general manager, Oscar Nguyen, in my office atop Lake Serene's main lodge. Oscar, a former naval officer with a keen eye for detail, knew my intentions from the moment I walked in carrying the dual key cards. He gestured toward the panoramic windows overlooking the Emerald Lake. "You want to blend in," he said, "so we'll check you into cottage number 7. It overlooks the marina, is petite, and hasn't been updated in years. Meanwhile, the executive floor is ready for your arrival when you decide to reclaim it." I nodded, picturing the creaky floorboards and dangling light fixture in that cottage. "Exactly. Treat me as an ordinary guest until I decide the time is right." Oscar reached into a drawer and produced a laminated map of the resort. He circled the old wing where we would house me for show. "Housekeeping and maintenance know the drill. No compliments, no upgrades, just the bare minimum of service," he explained. "Our staff will treat you cordially, but they'll assume you're an off-season traveller. Meanwhile, I'll field any real issues you encounter and keep you updated off the record." I felt a thrill of anticipation. I had designed this stealth operation precisely because I craved unfiltered insight into my family's attitudes. All those years of silences, of forced smiles as they handed me the smallest scraps of attention, now I would bear witness to their true colours. As July approached, I finalised my packing list. Comfortable jeans and sweaters for hiking, simple dresses for dinners, and a discreet blazer to wear when I emerged as the resort owner. On the morning of July 28th, I slipped through the employee entrance before dawn and checked into cottage 7 under my alias, Ms. Lila Morgan. The receptionist on duty, trained to the letter by Oscar, smiled politely, handed me a single cottage key on an unadorned fob, and wished me a pleasant stay. The cottage was as I remembered: sagging porch steps, chipped paint along the sill, and a ceiling fan that rattled when it turned on. I tested the faucet. The flow was weak and the hot water took ages to arrive. Perfect. Later that morning, I strolled through the lobby in unremarkable attire: jeans, a soft blouse, and canvas sneakers, waving casually at staff who greeted me by my assumed name. I overheard one housekeeper whisper to another, "She's paying seasonal rates, poor dear." The words stung, but I swallowed them, reminding myself of the ultimate reveal still to come. By midday, family members began trickling in. Aunt Celeste arrived first in a gleaming SUV, pausing to admire the grand stone facade of the lodge. She smoothed her designer skirt and swept past me without a glance. Miranda and Jasper followed, arms linked, already cooing over their room assignments. "Top floor suite with private balcony," Miranda proclaimed, as though she'd won the lottery. Meanwhile, I watched from the sidelines, feigning polite interest. That afternoon, my parents, Harrison and Beatrice, rolled up in our aging sedan, beaming at the sight of their luxury destination. My mother clutched my arm and whispered, "I'm so proud of you for joining us, darling." "I know you've been busy with your new job." I forced an affable laugh and hugged them close. "I couldn't miss a family reunion," I said. "Besides, someone has to make sure Uncle Everett doesn't order half the wine cellar to take home." They chuckled, relieved that I seemed comfortably in my place as just another guest. Dinner that evening took place in the grand dining hall, where long tables were set with crystal glassware and silver candelabras. My family was seated according to their perceived status: Aunt Celeste and Everett at the head, then Miranda and Jasper on either side, and finally my parents and me at the far end. When the servers, trained by Oscar, brought our first course, I noted how Everett snapped his fingers at the sommelier, demanding a top-shelf Pinot Noir. The sommelier complied with rigid politeness, though his eyes flickered with restrained displeasure. As conversation unfolded, I spoke little, letting others prattle about their careers and accolades. When asked where I worked, I offered a vague, "I manage events at a boutique hotel down south." No one probed further. My cousin Miranda congratulated me on climbing the ladder, oblivious to how near I truly stood to the top. Back in Cottage 7, I fell asleep to the distant hum of the lake and the soft creak of the ceiling fan. I imagined how different the room upstairs in the executive wing would look. Sleek marble floors, silk drapes, private terrace overlooking the peaks. But I stayed the course, determined to gather every sliver of insight into my family's behaviour before I made my decision. And as the moonlight danced across my threadbare quilt, I knew tomorrow's sunrise would bring me one step closer to revealing the truth. The morning light crept through the thin curtains of Cottage 7 as I woke to the soft chirping of sparrows outside my window. My wrists throbbed slightly from sleeping on unfamiliar bedding, and the faint drip of the bathroom faucet reminded me that this was indeed the rustic accommodation I had been assigned. I steeled myself with a deep breath, smoothed my hair, and pulled on a simple sundress, dark navy with a modest floral pattern, paired with ballet flats. Today, I would sit down to breakfast with my family and endure a few more small slights before the real test began. Down in the main dining room, I discovered a long buffet spread: scrambled eggs, smoked salmon, fresh fruit, artisanal pastries, and a selection of pressed juices. Staff members in crisp uniforms circulated with coffee and tea. I spotted my parents seated at a side table, 2 chairs pushed together as though they formed an island of warmth amid an archipelago of privilege. They waved me over, their smiles genuine and bright. "Lydia, come sit with us," my mother whispered as I approached. My father patted the empty seat beside him. I settled in gratefully, my heart swelling at their kindness. Across the room, Aunt Celeste reclined in her seat, inspecting me through half-lidded eyes as if gauging whether I belonged. Miranda and Jasper sat at the centre table, animatedly recounting yesterday's lavish dinner and speculating about today's planned activities. I listened, sipping my coffee, as Miranda gushed about her exclusive wine pairing reservation for that evening, an event requiring an additional fee and pre-booking weeks ago. I insisted, she explained to her husband Jasper, that we had the very best for this reunion. "It's an investment in family bonding, after all," I nodded, making a mental note. My family had all the information and financial means to book the wine pairing, but I had not been informed. They had excluded me by assumption, just as they had excluded me in every gathering since childhood. My pulse quickened at the realization, but I folded my napkin and sipped my tea as though oblivious. After breakfast, the family assembled at the lakeshore for a guided boat tour. The captain stood at the helm, offering a safety briefing before we boarded a sleek pontoon vessel. I drifted near the back, chatting with the boat staff about the morning's weather and the names of the local waterfowl. Meanwhile, my relatives took front row seats, posing for photographs with Lake Serene's crystal waters as their backdrop. At one point, Aunt Celeste looked back at me and offered a perfunctory, "Join us up front, Lydia, for a better view." I declined with a polite smile. "I'm good here, Aunt Celeste. This shade is perfect for my skin." She shrugged and returned to her selfie. Midway through the tour, the boat cruised past a secluded cove where the resort's private spa floats on a series of linked docks. Steam rose from the hot pools as guests lounged in robes, champagne flutes in hand. Miranda squealed and pointed. "Did you know about this, Lydia?" I feigned surprise. "I heard guests have to book these spots months in advance." She nodded, eyes alight. "I managed, through a contact, to snag 4 of the last slots." As the boat rounded the point, I caught my mother's eye. Her smile faltered, and I sensed her discomfort at my exclusion, at least from luxury offerings I, as the owner, had so carefully orchestrated. Back on land, the family scattered for optional activities: archery on the meadow, hiking to the Eagle's Perch overlook, or simply lounging by the water's edge. I chose the archery range, not out of genuine interest, but to gauge how my family interacted with staff there. The instructor, a tall young man named Theo, greeted me first. "Miss Morgan!" "Good to see you again." I returned his greeting warmly but formally. He handed me a bow and arrows, then offered to guide my first shots. Behind me, Aunt Celeste arrived with Miranda and Jasper, lightly critiquing my stance. "Keep your shoulder down and aim more to the left." I followed Theo's instructions instead, sending arrows neatly into the target center while watching their expressions of mild surprise. As they moved off to explore the hiking paths, I lingered, chatting with Theo about his training and ambitions. He spoke passionately about environmental conservation efforts around Lake Serene, a project I'd personally funded. When he mentioned this, I acknowledged it breezily. "I'm glad you're enjoying the support. We believe in preserving the watershed." Theo bowed his head respectfully. I wondered if he had recognised me, but he showed no sign of knowing my true identity. That afternoon, I retreated briefly to Cottage 7 to prepare for the evening's dinner. I dressed in a modest yet elegant ensemble, a charcoal skirt and pale blouse, and applied a touch of makeup to appear polished but not ostentatious. I rehearsed polite conversation topics in my head: family news, local attractions, fond childhood memories. I would hold my silence about the wine pairing until dessert, when I intended to make my first move in the coming confrontation. I arrived at the restaurant foyer just as guests queued to enter the private dining room. The maitre d' scanned their invitations, engraved cards denoting wine enthusiasts' evening printed in calligraphy. No card bore my name. I touched the velvet rope as if seeking entry. Miranda saw me and stepped aside. "Sorry, Lydia, this one's by reservation only." I smiled and nodded, turning away. "Not to worry," I replied. "I'll join my parents in the lounge." As I walked off, I heard Camille, the bartender, murmur to her colleague, "She must not have booked that." I pressed my lips together in a practiced smile and entered the lounge, greeting my parents and offering to fetch them drinks. They accepted, still unaware of the deeper dynamics at play. Inside the wine-pairing dinner, the sommelier poured flights of rare vintages, each accompanied by gourmet amuse-bouches. My cousins and aunt laughed and toasted, oblivious to the fact that all this indulgence rested on the pricing structure I controlled. I watched through the lounge's glass partition, my pulse steady, knowing that tomorrow's reckoning would arrive, and with it, the revelation that I was not just another guest, but the proprietor of Lake Serene Resort. I woke early, before dawn's lavender light had filtered across the mountains. my mind already racing through the day's agenda. Today was the morning I would slip out of Cottage 7 and into my true role. But first, I needed to endure one more half meal of silent scrutiny alongside my family. I dressed in a crisp white button-down and tailored navy slacks, an outfit bland enough to appear professional for a casual business trip, yet incongruous for a lakeside resort. I hoped it would mask any hint of luxury beneath. Downstairs in the breakfast hall, I found my relatives gathered around a cluster of tables pushed together in a rough semicircle. Miranda and Jasper were animatedly comparing cell phone photos of last night's wine pours, and Aunt Celeste was expounding on the stellar corporate event she had booked for next spring. I slid into the empty seat beside my parents, just as the servers offered fresh-baked croissants and steaming coffee. "Good morning, Ms. Morgan," chirped the server, using the name I'd given. He refilled my cup with conspicuous cheer. I nodded gratefully. My family barely spared me a glance. They were enmeshed in conversations about stock market trends and spa packages. It felt strangely satisfying to watch them ignore me. After all, I had mastered the art of invisibility. Once breakfast concluded, the plan called for me to take the hidden service elevator in the staff corridor to the executive floor. Oscar had arranged for the elevator to accept my master key card only at 6:30, ensuring no one else could follow. I slipped away from the table under the pretense of a quick walk to the lake, then ducked into a discreet door labelled staff only. Moments later, I stood in a gleaming marble hallway lined with contemporary art and recessed lighting, an entirely different world from the cottage's peeling wallpaper and threadbare rug. I tapped my MasterCard, and the elevator doors parted, whisking me upward. The doors reopened to reveal plush carpeting and brass accents. I stepped out and allowed myself a small smile as the hush of luxury enveloped me. A few strides down the corridor brought me to Suite 211, the presidential suite. I swiped my card again, and the door swung open onto a vast expanse of refined elegance. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed a panorama of the lake and forested ridges. A spacious living room boasted a cream leather sectional, a polished granite fireplace, and an artfully set bar stocked with crystal decanters. Beyond, a grand dining room held an oak table for 8, surrounded by gilded chairs. The bedroom featured a hand-carved king-size bed, layered with silk linens, and the bathroom gleamed with marble counters, dual vanities, and a jetted tub overlooking the treetops. I paused to inhale the air, carrying the faint scent of white orchids provided by the in-suite florist. Then, I remembered the focal point of today's revelation: the executive conference room directly opposite the suite. Oscar had prepared breakfast for the management team there at 10 o'clock, complete with branded notebooks and name placards. That would be the stage. I retrieved my weekend bag from the closet. It already contained the business suit I'd packed and changed swiftly. I glanced in the full-length mirror. Tailored charcoal blazer, silk ivory blouse, slim cut trousers, and polished pumps. My hair fell in a sleek bob, and I applied a single swipe of deep cherry lipstick. This was the uniform of a CEO, not a seasonal guest. At precisely 9:30, I left the suite, clicking my heels along the corridor until I reached the conference room's frosted glass door. Through the glass, I saw Oscar setting plates of quiche, fresh fruit, and pastries on the long walnut table. He looked up, smiled knowingly, and gave me a small nod. I tapped once, then stepped inside. "Good morning," I announced, voice calm and authoritative. Oscar paused, his expression shifting from professional courtesy to genuine respect. Ms. Marlowe, he greeted me, using my real name for the first time. Breakfast is ready. I surveyed the assembled faces of my senior management team, directors of sales, operations, guest services, and culinary arts, all of whom had supported me throughout my covert operation. They greeted me warmly, though with a hint of relief that the charade was ending. I offered brief, sincere thanks, then motioned toward the door. I'm about to make an announcement in the main lobby, I said, and I'd like all of you to join me. A ripple of anticipation passed through the room. They collected their tablets and followed me out. By 10 o'clock, the lobby was bustling with guests checking out and staff attending to arrivals. I led my team to stand beside the central stone fireplace, where the marble hearth formed a natural stage. The congregation of my family, still clustered near the reception, fell silent as they noticed the gathering. I stepped forward in my CEO attire and lifted a hand for quiet. A hush descended that even the ambient music failed to breach. Good morning, everyone, I began, projecting my voice with practiced ease. Before you proceed with your day's activities, I have an important introduction. Faces around me tilted in curiosity. My aunt's eyebrows shot up. Miranda and Jasper exchanged bewildered glances. My parents stood slightly apart from the others, fidgeting with hopeful expressions. I am Lydia Marlowe, I declared, owner and CEO of Serene Shores Collection. Last year, my company acquired Lake Serene Resort, and this property is our flagship estate. A murmur rippled through the crowd. I continued, deliberately pausing to let the significance sink in. Until now, I have remained discreet about my connection to the resort, to observe its guest experience firsthand. Even when that guest experience seemed to exclude certain members of my own family, I watched as realization dawned in the stages across their faces, confusion, disbelief, then a flush of embarrassment. Aunt Celeste's hand flew to her mouth. Jasper stared as though someone had whispered an unimaginable secret. Miranda's cheeks turned pale. I trust your stay has been comfortable, I asked, voice cool but not unkind. My aunt attempted a shaky, of course, though her tone lacked conviction. Then allow me to rectify any oversights. I gestured to Oscar, who stepped forward with a stack of envelopes bearing each family member's name. These contain new key cards for your rooms, I said. You'll find upgrades awaiting you, as well as reservations for the wine pairing dinner you requested. I let that sink in, then added, dinner is complimentary this evening as a gesture of goodwill. Faces lit with relief and surprise. My parents exchanged proud smiles, and even Aunt Celeste appeared chastened yet grateful. As my team and I dispersed to coordinate the changes, I watched my relatives move toward the reception desk to collect their new cards. I had given them an unforgettably dramatic lesson in perspective and respect, one that I hoped would reshape our family dynamics in the years to come. And as I observed them, now embracing the resort as honoured guests, I felt an exhilarating sense of fulfilment. The truth of my success was finally acknowledged, both by my family and by the land that I had lovingly restored. For a moment, I simply watched as my family processed the shift around them. Aunt Celeste, always the embodiment of composed elegance, stood with her shoulders stiff, as if bracing against a sudden gale. Miranda and Jasper exchanged incredulous looks, their previous confidence unravelled by the realisation that everything they had believed about my station was untrue. My parents, on the other hand, beamed at me like children proud of their mother's secret triumph. As the last of the new keycards were claimed, I motioned Oscar and our operations director, Priya Sharma, to accompany me toward the staff elevator. "Let's make sure the upgrades are in place," I said quietly, slipping away before the full bustle descended on the reception. Oscar and Priya followed, greeting me now with genuine warmth rather than the discreet deference they had displayed in my imposter role. We rode the elevator to the executive wing, checking off tasks on our tablets. Suite 312 confirmed champagne in room. Spa reservations logged under Marlowe family. Boathouse cottages cleared for rebooking. Each item completed felt like a small victory. Proof that I could reshape not only perceptions, but the actual experience they would enjoy. Half an hour later, I returned to the lobby dressed in the same suit, but minus my shoulder bag, carrying only a glass of sparkling water. My family had dispersed into smaller clusters. Some wandered toward the pool, others chatted near the gift shop. I approached Aunt Celeste first, gently tapping her on the arm. "Aunt Celeste," I began, voice calm. She looked at me, startled, before recovering her mask of politeness. "I wanted to apologise for not revealing my ownership sooner," I said. "I value your support, even if it meant watching from the sidelines." Her eyes softened. "Lydia, She faltered, searching for words. I continued before she could speak. "I hope this experience helps us see each other more honestly. I'm not asking for special treatment, only respect." She drew in a breath and nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "You have my respect and my admiration," she whispered. Next, I found Miranda and Jasper at the edge of the outdoor terrace. Miranda glanced at her brother, then back at me, her expression guarded. "You orchestrated all this," she said, voice low. "It was bold." I managed a small smile. "I know you're talented in your own right, Miranda, but you never gave me the chance to prove myself." She swallowed, glancing away. Jasper placed a tentative hand on her shoulder. "I'm sorry for underestimating you," he admitted. "I never realised what you had become." I nodded and offered a genuine hug to each of them. I saved my parents for last. They were seated by the grand fireplace, sipping tea with looks of calm pride. My father stood when he saw me approach. He clasped my hands. "Lydia, you've outdone yourself," he said, his voice thick with emotion. My mother joined in, placing a gentle hand on my cheek. "We're so proud to call you our daughter," she said simply. In that moment, I realised that revealing my ownership wasn't just about teaching my relatives a lesson. It was about freeing myself from the hidden cage of family expectations. The afternoon sun slanted low across the lake as my relatives began to disperse for the rest of the day's activities. Some drifted to the spa, others to the nearby hiking trails. I watched them go, the weight of years of pretense lifting from my shoulders. I reached for my phone and typed a quick message to Oscar. "Great work. Thank you." Almost instantly, his reply blinked onto the screen. "Always at your service, Ms. Marlowe." As evening approached, I prepared to host a private gathering for those family members who wished to share dinner with me. I changed into a sleek black dress, not too extravagant, but unmistakably refined, then made my way to the presidential suite's terrace. Oscar had arranged candlelit tables overlooking the lake and a menu showcasing our finest chef's creations. Seared scallops with lemon foam, sous vide lamb with rosemary juice, and a deconstructed pavlova for dessert. One by one, my relatives joined me. Aunt Celeste arrived first, her eyes moist but shining. She embraced me and raised her glass. "To your success, Lydia." Miranda and Jasper approached together, their smiles genuine at last. Even those who had been neutral or indifferent earlier sought my company, drawn by the newfound clarity of our relationships. I lifted my own glass and looked around the terrace at the people who had shaped my life. "Thank you all for being here," I said, "not just to enjoy this beautiful night, but for allowing me to show you who I truly am." The clinking of glasses sounded like the closing of a long chapter. As we dined, conversation shifted. We spoke of childhood memories, of hopes and plans, of restoring bonds strained by old assumptions. Later that night, I retreated to the presidential suite's living room, where the fire crackled softly. My parents sat beside me, and we watched the embers glow. "What will you do for the rest of the reunion?" my father asked. I leaned my head on his shoulder. "I'll continue doing what I always have, building experiences worth remembering," I replied. My mother nodded and took my hand. "And now we'll be right beside you." I closed my eyes and breathed in the cool mountain air scented with pine and possibility. The past was behind me, the future spread out like the shimmering lake below. No more quiet endurance, no more hidden truths. For the first time, I was fully seen, and that made all the difference. The next morning, I awoke before sunrise once again. Habits die hard when you're used to orchestrating every detail. But today, I didn't need to slip away in secret. Instead, I dressed in a casual, elegant wrap dress and soft loafers, comfortable enough for breakfast, yet refined enough to reflect my true standing. I paused at the door to the presidential suite, breathing in the crisp mountain air pouring in from the terrace, then made my way downstairs to the main dining room. When I entered, the staff greeted me by name, no longer Ms. Morgan, but Ms. Marlowe or Madam Owner, as several called me deferentially. I took a seat near the head of the long communal table, where plates of fresh fruit, chia seed pudding, smoked trout, and house-made granola had been artfully arranged. My parents sat to my right, their eyes bright with pride. Across from me, Aunt Celeste offered a tentative smile, an unspoken olive branch from the previous evening's reconciliation. As the family quieted down for the morning toast, I rose and raised my coffee cup. "I want to thank everyone for your openness and candour last night," I began. "It meant the world to me that we could share a genuine moment together. As we move through the rest of the reunion, please know that this resort is yours to enjoy, fully and without reservation." Glasses clinked. My father dabbed at his eyes. Even Aunt Celeste's posture softened. After breakfast, I convened a brief family meeting in the lounge. I gestured to a stack of envelopes on the coffee table, each embossed with a golden Lake Serene logo and a family member's name. "These contain your final invoices for the reunion," I explained. "Rather than splitting costs evenly, you'll see each charge reflects your actual usage and accommodations." A hush fell. Miranda exchanged a nervous glance with Jasper. Even my parents looked surprised. I passed the envelopes out one by one. Aunt Celeste hesitated before opening hers. As she read, her lips parted in shock. "Full rack rate for the executive suite," she murmured, "plus itemised charges for spa services and the wine-pairing dinner. I nodded. Yes, those services are generously offered at a discounted rate for family, but the executive suite is that suite's published rate. She swallowed hard. Miranda opened her envelope next. Cottage 7, complimentary as a guest, she announced in disbelief. Her accommodations from the first 2 days had been comped entirely, as a gesture of goodwill and apology. Jasper's invoice showed a 50% family discount on his villa's nightly rate, reflecting both his mid-tier status and genuine respect shown during the tour. My parents discovered that the deluxe king suite they'd occupied came at 75% of rack rate, another nod to their unwavering support over the years. When Jasper and Miranda reached my parents' table, my father raised his eyebrow. So, you're telling me we paid almost double what they did? He whispered. My mother patted his arm and balanced the moment with a wry smile. This is precisely what Lydia described last night. Consequences for assumptions. Finally, I handed the last envelope to my Uncle Everett Wellington. He opened it with a frown. Annual group rate for the base accommodation, he read, plus full pricing for every amenity beyond that. He looked up at me, incredulous. You're charging me? Your own uncle? I met his gaze steadily. I'm charging you fair value, just as I would any guest. Family averaged group rates only apply to base rooms. Anything premium is premium priced. The silence that followed spoke volumes. Aunt Celeste cleared her throat. I suppose this is the lesson you mentioned. I nodded. Respect isn't just spoken, it's earned through action. I hope this helps us all understand that value extends beyond titles or assumptions. She exhaled slowly, folding the invoice. It does, she admitted. And I'm sorry for underestimating you. As the staff discreetly collected the paid invoices, I observed my family's faces transform, from resentment to reluctant understanding and finally to genuine appreciation in some cases. The system I built had delivered exactly the message I intended, delivered in a language they understood best, their own finances. With the invoices settled, the remainder of the morning passed in easy camaraderie. Some relatives lounged by the pool, others joined a guided meditation in the spa garden. I spent a quiet hour kayaking across the still lake, reflecting on how far I'd come, from Cottage 7's rattling faucet to the helm of this serene retreat. Each paddle stroke felt like casting off the final ties to the self-doubt of my youth. By midday, I rejoined my parents on the terrace overlooking the water. My mother sipped mint-infused iced tea and sighed contentedly. I never imagined you'd take matters quite so literally, she laughed, but I admire your strength. My father nodded. You turned a family slight into a moment of clarity for all of us. I smiled, leaning into their warmth. As the sun began its descent, I knew the final celebrations of the reunion were yet to come. A farewell banquet overlooking the lake, followed by heartfelt goodbyes. But in that serene moment, I recognized that the true gift I had given and received was authenticity. No longer marred by hidden truths or unspoken resentments, our bonds felt renewed and equal. And so, I set my sights on the evening ahead, ready to host one last gathering where laughter would ring truer than ever, and where I, Lydia Marlowe, would stand not as the underestimated cousin, but as the rightful steward of Lake Serene Resort and of my own story. The farewell banquet was set on the terrace lawn, where lanterns dangled from the pines like a constellation come to rest among the branches. Long tables dressed in white linen held vases of wildflowers, and the head table, reserved for my parents and me, stood on a slight rise overlooking the lake's twilight shimmer. As I stepped into the lantern-lit clearing in my emerald-sheathed dress, I felt a quiet exhilaration. Tonight there would be no need for charades or secret keycards. Tonight I would be simply Lydia, daughter, cousin, and owner of Lake Serene Resort. My parents rose to greet me. "You look stunning," my mother whispered, adjusting a strand of hair behind my ear. My father offered me a proud smile. I took their hands and led them to their seats at the head table. One by one, extended family filtered in. Aunt Celeste, her posture now relaxed. Miranda and Jasper exchanging whispered apologies and promises of future collaboration. Uncle Everett, carrying himself with a newfound humility. Even cousins I hardly knew came forward to shake my hand, offering congratulations that felt, at last, heartfelt. Oscar and Priya circulated among the guests, ensuring champagne flutes remained topped and that servers glided past unobtrusively. I waved them off, my heart full of gratitude for the flawless execution of our plan. Each lantern's glow seemed to reflect the warm expressions on my relatives' faces, a glow I had longed to see for so many years. I raised my glass as the final guests took their seats. "Thank you all for sharing this magical weekend at Lake Serene," I began, my voice steady despite the flutter in my chest. "I hope the experiences you've had here, from the boat tours to the wine pairing, the hikes and spa rituals, have showed you not only the beauty of this place, but the vision and hard work required to craft it." A gentle murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. "More importantly," I continued, "I hope you've seen me for who I truly am, beyond assumptions and old hierarchies." I paused, eyes seeking those of my family. Celeste's thoughtful gaze, Miranda's tentative smile, my parents' proud nods. Tonight is a celebration of authenticity, connection, and respect. To new beginnings, for us all. Glasses clinked in a chorus of sincerity that resonated in the crisp mountain air. Dinner followed, a 4-course menu curated by my executive chef, featuring Lake Serene's signature dishes. We savoured wild mushroom risotto, kissed with truffle oil, venison loin draped in juniper berry reduction, and a dessert of lavender panna cotta topped with rose petal compote. With each course, conversations flowed more freely, years of distance dissolving like mist under the rising moon. At one table nearby, I overheard my cousin Serena, a quiet artist rarely heard amid the family's boisterous voices, say to her neighbour, "I never knew Lydia had such vision. It's inspiring." I paused, letting her words sink in. They felt like the truest tribute of all, that someone saw me not merely as a title or a label, but as a creator of experiences that touched people's hearts. After dessert, the band struck up a gentle melody, and couples drifted to the dance floor. I took my parents' hands and led them in a slow waltz under the lantern canopy. My father's steps were tentative at first, but soon he found the rhythm. My mother laughed softly as she spun beneath the trees. I closed my eyes, savouring the moment, the culmination of years of dreams and determination, shared with the people who mattered most. Later, as the evening wound down, I found Aunt Celeste standing by the railing, gazing at the moon's reflection on the water. I joined her quietly. "Thank you," she said without turning. I placed a hand on her shoulder. "For what?" She turned, her eyes shimmering. "For teaching me that respect isn't given, it's earned, and for giving me grace to learn when I was wrong." I smiled, feeling the warmth of genuine reconciliation bloom between us. "Family," I said, "is the hardest place to prove yourself, but the most rewarding when you succeed." As the last guests bade their goodbyes, hugging and promising to stay in touch, I helped my parents into our car. We drove back up the winding mountain road to the presidential suite in companionable silence, the lanterns retreating into pinpricks of light behind us. In the suite's living room, I poured us each a nightcap, the resort's signature herbal cordial, and we sat by the fireplace. "I'm proud of you," my father said simply. My mother squeezed my hand. "We always were." I leaned back, feeling a contented exhaustion wash over me. The weekend had been both exhausting and exhilarating, a grand performance that ended in heartfelt connection. Before turning in, I stepped onto the terrace one last time. The lake lay still beneath a sky strewn with stars. Lanterns flickered faintly on the distant shore. I allowed myself a moment of quiet reflection. The path that had led me here, from dusty boardwalks to marble lobbies, the mentors who had guided me, the family bonds we had reforged. I breathed deeply, filling my lungs with the cool mountain air laced with pine and possibility. Tomorrow, the resort would return to its rhythm of guests and routines. I would be known simply as the proprietor, not the secret guest. But tonight, in the hush of the mountain, I felt wholly myself, no longer an underestimated cousin, but a woman who had claimed her place through vision, resilience, and authenticity. And as I closed the terrace door behind me, I knew Lake Serene would continue to be a testament to what happens when dreams are nurtured and truths finally shine. The morning after the banquet dawned with a hush of reverence, as though Lake Serene itself paused to watch my family's final hours here. Soft light filtered through gauzy curtains, and the distant chirp of a lone loon drifted across the still water. I woke before 6 o'clock, unable to resist one last moment on the terrace. The air was cool and carried the faint scent of dew on pine needles. I wrapped a cashmere shawl around my shoulders and gazed at the horizon, where rose-pink clouds hovered above the peaks. In that quiet instant, I felt the weight of the weekend's revelations settle into something peaceful, a sense of closure tempered by fresh possibility. By 7, I was in the suite's kitchen with our executive chef, Matteo, sampling poached pear compote and steaming breakfast tarts for the farewell meal. He watched me chop mint sprigs with an appraising eye. "Everything written?" he asked, referring to the family invoices and room upgrades. I nodded, stirring the compote. "Every detail executed." He cracked a knowing smile. "It's not every day a host checks invoices with more care than guests." Bravo. I thanked him and poured a cup of Earl Grey tea, then slipped into a tailored day dress, soft jade green, knee-length and tailored at the waist. It felt appropriate, refined yet approachable. By 8:30, I descended to the lobby, where Oscar and Priya waited. Their uniforms exuded quiet competence, and their expressions carried pride rather than duty. "All set for checkout?" I asked quietly. "They've printed itemised bills at each desk," Oscar replied. "Staff are ready to see off departing guests." Transportation is arranged. Priya handed me a printed itinerary of family departures. My parents at 10:30, Aunt Celeste's driver at 11, Miranda and Jasper by noon, and a final coach for extended cousins at mid-afternoon. "Your parents would like to see you downstairs," Priya added. "They asked if you'd join them for their ride." I swallowed a lump of emotion and murmured, "Of course." My parents awaited me by the valet stand in our matching wool coats, blue for Dad, burgundy for Mum. They embraced me tightly. "Thank you," my father whispered into my hair. My mother pressed a gentle kiss to my cheek. "You've given us more than we ever expected." We shared a brief, lingering moment before Mum handed me a small leather pouch. "Open this later," she said with a smile. As their sedan pulled away, I waved until they disappeared around the curve. Oscar approached for his daily briefing, a quick review of the day's bookings and staff schedules. We spoke in hushed tones, the public banner of owner still emblazoned across my chest. By 9:30, the first checkout bell chimed. I stationed myself at the front desk, greeting guests with genuine warmth. When Aunt Celeste approached with her entourage, 11 years of privilege now tempered by humility, I offered her a discreet nod of acknowledgement. "I hope you enjoyed your stay," I told her. She smiled, eyes glistening. "More than I can express." She paused, then slipped me a folded note. I accepted with a gentle curtsy of my head. Miranda and Jasper arrived next, their young faces open with tentative admiration. I watched as they thanked the receptionists and signed their invoices with steady hands. Jasper looked up at me and said quietly, "I'd like to propose something. Next year, I want to manage part of the booking process with you, as a partner." My chest swelled with pride. I nodded. I'd welcome that. By noon, the lobby had emptied except for extended cousins, some teary-eyed, some silent, each carrying a lanyard and a single suitcase. I said farewell to each, offering a final handshake or hug. A few whispered words of apology or gratitude, others merely smiled awkwardly. But each departure felt like a closing sentence in a long, winding novel of family dynamics. After the last guest had departed, I stood in the quiet lobby, the polished floors reflecting the afternoon sun. Oscar joined me. "Well done," he said softly. "The resort is back to normal operations." I exhaled, my shoulders relaxing for the first time in days. "Thank you for everything." We shared a brief, genuine smile of mutual respect. Late that afternoon, I returned to my suite and opened the leather pouch my mother had given me. Inside lay 2 delicately framed photographs, one of my parents smiling in front of the cottage, the other of the entire family gathered at the banquet under the lanterns. On the back of each was a handwritten note. "Remember that you are loved, for who you are, not just what you achieve." Tears pricked my eyes as I read her words. I placed the photographs on the mahogany desk and sat, reflecting on the weekend's journey. I thought of my younger self, the shy girl folding linens at Crestwood Inn, dreaming of possibilities no one else could see. I considered the path I'd walked, the mentors who believed in me, the risks I'd taken, the renovations I'd overseen, and the courage it had taken to claim my own success. And I felt gratitude for the resilience that carried me here, for the family bonds I had mended, and for the future we would build together. As evening approached, I descended once more to the terrace and watched the last rays of sun ripple across the lake. A cool breeze stirred the treetops, carrying the promise of new beginnings. I raised an imaginary glass to the horizon. "Here's to authenticity," I whispered to the dusk, "to hard-earned respect, and to the next chapter in our shared story." And with that, I stepped back into the lodge, ready to lead Lake Serene Resort toward its next season, with guests old and new, each welcomed by the heart and vision of the woman who had claimed her place at the table. The following morning, I awoke without the usual rush of anticipation. No undercover breakfast, no staged reveal awaiting me. Instead, I felt a tranquil satisfaction, as though I'd completed a journey of 1,000 miles in a single weekend. I dressed in light grey slacks and a soft blouse appropriate for the day's final tasks, overseeing staff debriefings and preparing Lake Serene for its new season of guests. At 8 o'clock, I convened a short meeting in the executive conference room with Oscar, Priya, Matteo, and department heads. Folding my hands on the polished oak table, I addressed them with genuine warmth. "Thank you all for your extraordinary work these past days," I began. "You executed our plan flawlessly and treated our secret guest with the same dedication we give every patron. Now, as we transition back to regular operations, I want to ensure we build on the momentum we've created." Oscar produced a printed summary of weekend performance metrics. Near perfect guest satisfaction, impeccable room readiness, and glowing staff. "Feedback on morale? Our team has never been more aligned," he noted. Priya added details on upcoming group bookings and safety drills for the autumn season. Matteo presented proposed menu changes inspired by family favourites from the banquet. Wild mushroom risotto would become a signature special, and pear compote would feature on our high tea menu. I listened, absorbing each suggestion, then offered my vision. "Let's maintain the personal touches we revealed this weekend. Handwritten welcome notes, curated local guides, and monthly family-style dinners that bring our guests together." Heads nodded in agreement. As the meeting concluded, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Leading Lake Serene was not merely a role, but a continual act of creative hospitality. Afterward, I strolled through the lobby, greeting staff by name and listening to their impressions of the family reunion. Many shared stories of how witnessing reconciliation had inspired them to reach out to their own relatives. I paused to thank each team member personally, offering tokens of appreciation: a serendipity stone pin for the front desk, a set of engraved wine glasses for the sommelier, a handcrafted journal for the events coordinator. Their grins were more rewarding than any facade of ownership. By midday, I walked the grounds alone, tracing the stone pathways by the boathouse and pausing at the wind chimes near the spa garden. Sunlight danced on ripples in the cove where my family had kayaked, and I recalled my first paddle stroke there. How distant and inaccessible everything once felt. Now, the lake belonged to me, yet more importantly, I belonged to it. As afternoon edged toward evening, I encountered my parents tending to the potted herbs behind the lodge, mint, basil, and lavender that supplied our culinary and spa programs. My father reached out to steady a balancing terracotta planter, as my mother knelt to prune a sprig of rosemary. They smiled when they saw me, We thought you might like some help, Mom said, wiping soil from her hands. Dad joined in, expertly guiding her fingers. Consider it our little gift, he added. I knelt beside them, planting a new sprig of thyme in a terracotta pot. Our hands worked the earth together in comfortable silence. As the sun sank low, casting long shadows across the gardens, I felt the weekend's lessons transform into daily practice. I was no longer the hidden owner. I was a leader known to my team and embraced by my family. I rose and wrapped an arm around each parent. Thank you, I said simply, for everything. Under the fading sky, with the scent of lavender in the air and the gentle lap of water against the shore, I realized that Lake Serene was more than a resort. It was a living testament to perseverance, authenticity, and the power of seeing one another clearly. And as I guided my parents back toward the lodge, I looked forward to mornings yet to come, waking not with apprehension, but with quiet joy at the story still unfolding under the alpine sun. A week passed since the Reynolds family reunion, and Lake Serene Resort settled back into its familiar rhythm. Early mornings found me at the executive office, reviewing forecasted occupancy rates and group bookings. Midday, I might lead a site visit with our event planners or test new menu proposals in the chef's kitchen. Yet every task felt imbued with fresh purpose, now that my family's perceptions had genuinely shifted. That Saturday, our first summer wedding of the season unfolded on the peninsula lawn. White folding chairs faced a floral arbour overlooking the lake, and soft laughter mingled with the trill of bird calls. I arrived before ceremony time, greeted the couple, college sweethearts from Christchurch, and surveyed the final arrangements. The arbour's garlands of peony and eucalyptus were perfect. The aisle runner lay straight and unmarred. I paused at the back row, where I spotted Aunt Celeste and my parents perched side by side. My mother waved, her smile radiating quiet pride. I stepped forward, smoothing my light blue blazer and offering Aunt Celeste a warm embrace. "Thank you for coming," I whispered. She patted my arm. "Wouldn't miss it for the world." Mum and Dad rose to greet me, their eyes bright. "It's a beautiful ceremony," Dad said. "You've outdone yourselves, as always." I squeezed his hand. "I'm glad you're here." Their presence anchored me, a reminder that my true legacy was not only in polished marble foyers, but in bonds strengthened by understanding. Once the bride and groom exchanged vows and the newlyweds slipped away for photos, I returned to the executive suite to finalise the next week's schedule. My inbox held thank you notes from staff. The sommelier expressing gratitude for the personalised wine training I'd arranged. The groundskeeper praising the new ergonomic tools we'd purchased after our post-reunion debrief. The spa director thanking me for greenlighting the lavender-infused treatment room. Each message reinforced how a single weekend of authenticity rippled outward, embedding trust and enthusiasm throughout our team. At 2:00, I met with our marketing manager, Elise, in the glass-walled conference room overlooking the boathouse docks. She arrived clutching a stack of mock-up flyers and social media drafts. "We've captured so many inspiring moments," she began, scrolling through images of lantern-lit banquets, family hikes, and moonlit terraces. "Guests are responding positively. Our engagement rate has already climbed 20%. She paused, then added thoughtfully, "And the story of your reunion, it's resonating." People love seeing a leader who's also human. I nodded, considering the delicate balance between authenticity and privacy. Let's share a pared down version, I replied. Focus on themes: family, resilience, transformation. Highlight how Lake Serene brings people together, but we'll keep personal details minimal. Some stories are best told one-on-one. Elise agreed, and together we refined a campaign that felt honest, yet included the dignity I valued. Later that afternoon, I wandered the trails alone, my footsteps muffled by pine needles. I reached the Eagle's Perch overlook, where the family had paused during their hike, and inhaled the crisp mountain air. Below, the lake lay as serene as its name promised. I reflected on the journey from Cottage 7's leaky ceiling to this perch of triumph. I realised how much courage it had taken to reveal my true self, and how that vulnerability had become my greatest strength. On my descent, I encountered Serena, my artistic cousin who had quietly told a friend she was inspired by my vision. She sketched the lakeside panorama on a small easel. "May I?" she asked, gesturing to an empty stool. I sat, watching her capture the sapphire water and golden light. We spoke of paint and technique, of how she'd like to hold an exhibition here next spring. I encouraged her, offering to host the gallery in our boathouse annex. Her face lit up. "I'd be honoured," she said. I smiled, thinking how reciprocal support could enrich both our lives. Returning to the lodge, I found my parents in the lounge sipping herbal tea. They beamed as I approached. Mum held out an envelope. "We thought you might like a little memento," she said. Inside lay pressed wildflowers collected during their morning walk: lupine, columbine, and forget-me-nots, tied with a silk ribbon. I was touched. It was a reminder of the natural beauty that inspired everything we did here. That evening, I hosted a celebratory dinner for the leadership team in the executive dining room, a more intimate version of the banquet we'd given for family. As we toasted to a successful opening week, I looked around at the faces who had made our vision reality: Oscar, Priya, Matteo, Elise, and others. Their eyes reflected trust and camaraderie. "To authenticity," I said, raising my glass, "and to the magic we create when we truly see one another." They echoed the toast, and we savoured that moment of shared purpose. Later, alone on the terrace under a velvet sky, I listened to the echo of the day's laughter carrying across the water. A soft breeze stirred the lanterns, and I felt a deep gratitude for the path that had brought me here. No longer hidden behind assumption, I was fully present, owner, family member, and steward of Lake Serene's enduring promise. And as the stars emerged overhead, I knew the best chapters were still waiting to be written. Summer's crescendo arrived on a warm Wednesday afternoon, when the annual harvest feast unfolded in Lake Serene Resort Spruce Pavilion. Local farmers brought tables laden with heirloom tomatoes, wild mushrooms, aged cheeses, and freshly churned butter. Long trestle tables formed a horseshoe around the central hearth, where wood smoke mingled with the scent of rosemary boughs. I arrived in a soft ochre sundress, its hem grazing my calves and echoing the golden hues of the harvest bounty. As I entered, guests murmured greetings, regulars who had returned after tasting our seasonal celebrations, and I greeted each by name, the joy of reunion reflected in their eyes. Behind me, the kitchen doors swung open, and Chef Matteo led the procession of dishes: pan-seared trout fillets adorned with lemon basil beurre blanc, roasted root vegetable terrines crowned with microgreens, and a decadent berry galette served, alongside lavender-infused crème fraîche. The crowd applauded as plates were carried table to table, servers in crisp aprons weaving through wooden benches. I watched, satisfied, as familiar faces, some still remembering the family reunion's drama, glowed at the spectacle. Moments later, I spotted my parents seated near the head of the horseshoe. My mother's fingers danced over a napkin as she studied each dish with delight. My father raised his glass of orchard-pressed apple cider and silent toast when he saw me approach. I slipped into the seat beside him and murmured, "Your favourite, mushroom ragu en polenta." He grinned. You remembered. I rested my hand on his arm, savouring the warmth of shared memories and newly forged traditions. As the meal progressed, I rose to deliver a brief address. Guests paused, carving peppers or sipping wine, as I stepped onto a small platform beside the hearth. I held up my glass of sparkling elderflower cordial. "Thank you for joining us at Harvest Feast," I began, my voice carrying across the wooden beams. "This season is all about abundance of food, friendships, and stories shared under the open sky." I paused to let the applause swell. "I hope your time here at Lake Serene has renewed your connection to nature and community." My eyes found Serena, who sketched quietly at the back, and Elise, who nodded enthusiastically. "Here's to many more seasons of growth, both in our fields and in our hearts." Glasses chimed in harmony. After dinner, a spontaneous jam session erupted as local musicians tuned fiddles and guitars. Guests flocked to the improvised dance floor, some stepping lightly in waltzes, others clapping in time. My parents joined, swaying beneath the pavilion's lantern glow. I watched them before stepping forward, inviting Serena to dance. She tucked her sketchbook under her arm, and together we twirled, our laughter weaving into the music. Around us, Lake Serene Resort's heart pulsed with life. Staff and guests, friends and family, sharing moments that transcended mere hospitality. Later, as the last notes faded and the crowd dispersed, I walked lakeside with Oscar and Priya. We paused at the dock where the moon's reflection shimmered in gentle ripples. Oscar broke the silence first. "Your vision is inspiring everyone, from guests to staff." Priya added, "I've received dozens of messages asking when the Harvest Feast becomes an annual tradition." I smiled, gazing at the water. "It is now," I replied. "And every year we'll add something new, perhaps a storytelling circle next time, or a lantern launch at dusk." Their enthusiastic nods affirmed the shared commitment to evolving the resort spirit. Returning to the lodge, I found a half-moon pendant hanging on my doorknob, tied with a pale ribbon. Dad had slipped it there, an elegant silver charm engraved with a stylized lake ripple. Inside, a small card read, "To remind you that even in darkness, your light guides us." My eyes brimmed with tears as I clasped the pendant around my neck. It felt like closing the circle. My parents' unconditional support, the family reconciliation, and now this symbol of enduring guidance. By the hearth in the executive lounge, I poured myself a nightcap, our signature honey lavender cordial, and settled into an armchair upholstered in moss green velvet. The lodge was hushed now, the last guests retired to their rooms. I let my gaze wander to the floor-to-ceiling windows, where the lake lay under a blanket of silver light. In that moment, I reflected on the journey spanning childhood ambition, professional ambition, and personal revelation. I recalled my first days at Crestwood Inn, translating guest complaints into improvements, scrubbing grout with a toothbrush, learning that true hospitality is born of empathy and attention. I remembered Raymond Bennett's affirmation of my potential and his unwavering encouragement. I remembered the countless hours spent renovating Tatewood Manor, the exhilaration of acquiring Lake Serene, and the gamble of inviting my family under false pretenses to reveal their true values. Most of all, I remembered the faces around me this weekend, the hesitance that gave way to respect, the humility that blossomed into connection, and the joy that followed authenticity. Finishing my cordial, I rose and placed the half-moon pendant on the side table, its silver surface catching the lantern glow. I allowed myself a small, contented smile. Lake Serene Resort was not only a testament to my vision, but a living tapestry woven by every individual who graced its shores, staff, guests, and family alike. And as the harvest feast's embers cooled, I felt certain that the warmth it kindled would blaze anew with every passing season. With that, I turned off the lounge lights, the soft click echoing in the empty room, and slipped into the night. My steps light, my heart full, and my path clear under the moonlit sky. The morning sun filtered through the lodge's panoramic windows like a promise freshly born. It was Thursday, my scheduled office day, when I reviewed monthly performance metrics, met with department heads, and charted Lake Serene Resort's strategic course. But this particular morning felt different. Quiet after weeks of orchestrating family reunions and harvest celebrations, it offered space for reflection and forward momentum. I padded down the hallway in a light cashmere sweater and slate grey trousers, stopping at the door of my office. Oscar stood outside, tablet in hand. "Good morning, Ms. Marlowe," he said with a respectful bow. "Your first meeting is in 10 minutes. Marketing and finance." I nodded, smoothing my hair. "Thank you, Oscar. I'll be right there." Inside the office, I settled behind my desk, its wood grain warm beneath my fingertips. On one corner lay the half-moon pendant my father had given me, glinting softly in the morning light. I picked it up and held it for a moment, attuning my mind to the responsibility it symbolized, guiding others through my vision and integrity. At precisely 9 o'clock, Elise, our marketing manager, entered with a stack of reports and a laptop. She was followed by Thomas, our financial controller, whose cautious demeanour belied an analytical brilliance. I invited them to seat themselves as I poured coffee from a silver carafe. "Elise, how are the post-harvest social campaigns performing?" I asked, reviewing her data summaries. She smiled, tapping her tablet. Engagement climbed 32% compared to last year. User-generated content, photos and stories from the reunion and harvest feast, has created a ripple effect. We've had inquiries from 15 new corporate groups, several of whom specifically mention the family story as inspiration. Her eyes shone with excitement. Thomas leaned forward. From the financial side, weekend occupancy rates have increased by 18%, and banquet revenue, of which the reunion and harvest feast accounted for 40% this week, has outperformed projections by $20,000. He tapped the spreadsheet. If we maintain this momentum, the resort will exceed its annual revenue forecast by mid-September. I allowed a satisfied smile to spread across my face. Excellent work, both of you. Let's capitalise on this momentum. Elise refined the campaign to include early bird autumn getaway packages, focusing on small group retreats that echo the themes of family and authenticity. Thomas prepared cost analyses for expanding our banquet services, perhaps offering a harvest-to-table weekend package through October. They nodded, taking notes. With the meeting concluded, I lingered to review a draft of the autumn brochure Elise had prepared. Rich photos of rust-tinted leaves along the hiking trails, couples toasting by fire pits, and chefs foraging mushrooms in the forest. Each image exuded warmth and connection, the essence of Lake Serene Resort. By late morning, I transitioned to the spa complex to join Priya for a site inspection. The new lavender treatment room we'd introduced after the reunion had become wildly popular, and we planned to create a secondary forest bathing suite inspired by Japanese onsen traditions. As we walked through the vaulted ceilings and pebblestone pathways, I envisioned clients reclining beneath cedar beams, inhaling steam infused with pine and juniper. Priya paused beside the saltwater plunge pool. "You know," she said softly, "your family's reconciliation weekend sparked more than just bookings. The team feels like we're part of something greater, like every guest we welcome is another step in our story." I placed a hand on her arm. "That was always the goal," I replied. "Hospitality is about fostering a sense of belonging, whether it's a family finding its bonds or strangers creating memories together." Afterward, I took a solitary walk along the lakeshore. The late morning sun warmed the stones beneath my loafers as I passed the boathouse docks, now silent except for a lone heron stalking fish in the shallows. I paused at the spot where my family had launched their kayaks, my parents helping Serena find her balance, Miranda laughing as water splashed her. The memories seemed to drift across the water like fallen leaves carried by a gentle current. A soft chime on my phone drew me from my reverie, a message from my mentor, Raymond Bennett. "Heard about the reunion's success? Proud of your leadership? Let's catch up soon." My heart warmed at his continued encouragement. I tapped a quick reply. "Thank you, Raymond. Your guidance shaped every step. I'd love to meet next week." Returning to the lodge, I discovered my parents in the library, poring over travel brochures for their upcoming trip to New Zealand. My mother looked up. "We found a beautiful coastal inn," she said, holding a pamphlet. "Could we model some of their traditions here next summer?" She pointed to a midwinter feast concept. I smiled. "I think that fits perfectly. Let's discuss how we can adapt it." Their eagerness to contribute filled me with pride. It signalled our bond had truly transformed into partnership. As late afternoon softened into evening, I hosted a small reception for local tourism board officials and community leaders. We gathered on the terrace under strings of festoon lights, sampling sparkling ciders and canapés. I delivered brief remarks on Lake Serene's economic impact. 20 local jobs created, partnerships with 4 family farms, and ongoing conservation efforts protecting 20 acres of shoreline habitat. The officials nodded approvingly, some jotting notes for a feature in the chamber newsletter. When the reception concluded, I slipped away for a final moment's solitude on the terrace. The sun dipped low, casting a golden glow across the lake and painting the sky in strokes of lavender and rose. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply, embracing the culmination of years of ambition, authenticity, and resilience. I was no longer defined by my family's perceptions or an undercover test. I was the steward of this place, shaping experiences that connected hearts and honoured the land. And as twilight deepened, I whispered a silent vow to continue nurturing Lake Serene's story, one of vision, compassion, and the enduring power of showing up as one's true self. Dawn arrived in a quiet mist over Lake Serene, turning the water into a silken mirror of pale rose and lavender. I awoke with a soft murmur of wind in the pines, then stretched and slid into a charcoal cashmere wrap and tailored slacks for the day's final event, a leadership retreat at the Boathouse Annex. Today, I would convene my department heads for our quarterly vision session, an opportunity to reflect on the past season and chart our course for the coming year. By 8:30, I was in the glass-walled meeting room overlooking the docks. Oscar, Priya, Matteo, Elise, and several others gathered around a rough-hewn cedar table, each cradling a steaming mug of dark roast coffee. I began with a moment of gratitude. Thank you all for joining me this morning. These retreats are more than strategic check-ins. They're a chance to nurture our shared purpose. I looked around at their attentive faces, the same team who had helped orchestrate the family reunion revelation, the harvest feast, and the resort's blossoming season. Their loyalty and creativity were the lifeblood of Lake Serene. Our first agenda item was guest experience innovations. Elise presented a new concept for story walks, guided trails where guests follow artist-designed markers recounting local folklore. She displayed mock-ups of weatherproof signposts and interactive QR codes linking to audio narratives voiced by local elders. This will deepen our connection to the region's heritage, she explained. I approved the prototype and asked for a phased rollout by midsummer, envisioning guests pausing beneath ancient hemlocks to learn of mountain spirits and pioneer settlers. Next, Matteo outlined enhancements for our culinary program, a partnership with a nearby apiary to feature honey tasting flights, and a plan to host a chef's table dinner series spotlighting foraged ingredients. We discussed the logistics, sustainable foraging practices, seasonal menu cycles, and pricing tiers. My mind drifted momentarily to the evening harvest feast and the laughter that had rippled across the pavilion, reminding me how food could unite strangers as family. Let's finalise menus by next week, I said, and market the dinner series as an exclusive weekend experience. After a brief break, we tackled staff development and well-being. Priya reported on the success of our post-reunion morale workshops, noting significant increases in team engagement and reduced turnover. We agreed to expand professional development allowances, funding hospitality management courses or creative workshops. I emphasised our commitment to cultivating talent from within. When someone joins Lake Serene, they become part of our extended family. Let's give them every tool to thrive. Thomas joined remotely via video call to present the fiscal outlook. Our summer revenue had exceeded projections by 15%, driven largely by repeat bookings and positive word of mouth after the reunion story circulated. He cautioned that winter occupancy typically dips, suggesting we introduce midweek winter wellness retreats with spa and yoga packages. I nodded, imagining guests sipping hot herbal tisanes by the fire after snowshoeing around the frozen lake. "Let's pilot 4 weekend packages beginning January 1st, I instructed. As our retreat approached its close, I invited open discussion. Oscar raised a hand. "I'd like to propose a biannual owners' walkabouts, where you join small groups of guests for behind-the-scenes tours." He recalled how the family's tour had transformed their appreciation of the resort. "It humanizes leadership and offers genuine connection." I smiled at the memory of guiding relatives through the wine cellar. "That's an excellent idea," I agreed. "We'll schedule owners' walkabouts each spring and autumn." By midday, the retreat concluded with a picnic of artisan sandwiches and fresh-pressed lemonade by the boathouse docks. I lingered, watching staff and leaders share reflections under the clear sky. Their voices blended with the lap of waves against the pilings and the distant song of a meadow lark. In that moment, I felt our collective vision solidify, a tapestry woven of innovation, hospitality, and authenticity. Late that afternoon, as I walked back to the main lodge, I passed the garden where my parents had tended herbs. I paused to breathe in the mingled scents of rosemary and lavender, feeling gratitude for every chapter of this journey, from a modest cottage's leak to the presidential terrace's panorama. I realized Lake Serene had grown beyond a resort. It was a living community sustained by mutual respect, shared stories, and the courage to reveal one's true self. Returning to my office, I placed the Story Walk mock-ups on my desk alongside the retreat notes and our financial projections. Each represented a promise of growth, connection, and enduring hospitality. I leaned back in my chair, closing my eyes for a brief moment of quiet triumph. The path had not always been easy, but it had led to this: a leadership rooted in empathy, a team united by purpose, and a family reconciled by authenticity. Tomorrow, new guests would arrive, each seeking refuge, adventure, or celebration, and I would greet them as myself. No masks, no secrets, only the promise of a place where every guest, like every family member, is seen, valued, and welcomed home. The first hint of autumn arrived on a crisp Tuesday morning, when a thin mist curled over Lake Serene like a silken shawl. I stood on the terrace of the presidential suite, wrapped in a cashmere cardigan, inhaling the cool, fragrant air. Today marked the launch of our new Story Walk trails, artist-designed markers placed along the forest paths, each telling a chapter of local lore. This initiative had been born from our leadership retreat 3 days earlier, and now it was time to bring it to life. I joined Elise, our marketing manager, and Theo, the head of grounds maintenance, at the trailhead kiosk. Behind us, guests gathered in small clusters, mugs of warm cider in hand, their breath clouding in the morning air. Elise held up a tablet displaying a map of the Story Walk. "We've already scanned 50 registrations," she said, excitement shining in her eyes. "The interactive app is ready. Guests can choose audio narration or read at their own pace." Theo tapped one of the first markers, an etched bronze plaque depicting the legendary moonlight fisherman, a spectral figure said to guide lost travellers across these very woods. "All markers are sealed against moisture, and the app's audio files loop seamlessly," he reported. I nodded with satisfaction, remembering how my cousin Serena's sketches had inspired these designs. As our small gathering grew quiet, I raised my voice to welcome our guests. "Good morning, everyone, And thank you for joining us on Lake Serene's inaugural story walk, I began, my words echoing softly among the trees. These trails weave together nature and narrative, honouring both our land's beauty and the stories passed down through generations. A hush fell as I pointed to the sign, "Begin your journey here." We set off, winding along a gravel path threaded with fallen leaves. At each marker, I paused to read aloud the tale of the moonlight fisherman, the legend of the pine tree sentinel, and the story of the first homesteader, whose solitary farmstead gave rise to the village that became Port Willow. Guests listened raptly, their faces reflecting the dappled light. At one point, a young boy tugged at his mother's sleeve. "Do you think the fisherman still watches over the lake?" he asked wide-eyed. She smiled and replied, "I believe he does." By mid-morning, we reached a clearing where a sculptural bench, shaped like a fallen cedar trunk, invited guests to rest. I joined them, sipping hot tea from a thermos. Elise pointed to her phone. "Look at this feedback. Guests are sharing photos and tagging us with hashtag Lake Serene Stories." I scrolled through glowing comments. "Enchanted by the fisherman tale. Best trail experience I've ever had. Lake Serene's heart beats in its legends." I felt a surge of pride. Our collaborative vision had become a living experience, connecting visitors to the land and its heritage. I turned to see my parents approaching, hand in hand. My mother wore a woolen scarf in autumnal hues. My father carried a walking stick he'd borrowed from Theo. They greeted me with hugs, then settled on the bench beside me. "This is wonderful," my mother said, eyes bright. "I hadn't realised how powerful the stories could be." My father nodded. "Thank you for including us," he added. "My grandmother used to tell a version of the pine tree sentinel legend." I smiled, gently squeezing their hands. "Honouring our roots helps us grow forward," I replied. "And your stories made this project richer." After a final marker, we descended back toward the lodge, laughter and conversation flowing naturally among guests and staff. As the sun climbed, I slipped away to the kitchen, where Chef Matteo and his team prepared a buffet of autumnal delights: roasted butternut squash soup, sage-crusted pork tenderloin, and a dessert of spiced apple galette. I offered Matteo a nod of approval, another seasonal tradition inaugurated. But by noon, the lodge was alive with the hum of satisfied guests, and I retreated to my office to catch up on emails and plan the next initiative, a midwinter lantern festival promising quiet magic on the frozen lake. I typed notes, scheduled meetings with the events team, and outlined budget projections. Each new idea felt like a promise waiting to bloom. Later that afternoon, I found Serena in the boathouse annex, sketching the design for a permanent art installation inspired by the story walk. We discussed her concepts, commissioned bronze sculptures at key trail markers, and set a timeline for winter installation. Her enthusiasm reminded me of how a single idea, nurtured by collaboration, could enhance every guest's experience. As dusk settled, I joined Oscar and Priya in the lounge for a brief debrief. We reviewed the day's attendance, guest feedback, and operational notes. Both affirmed the success of the Story Walk launch and shared ideas for improvements: additional benches, multilingual signage, and seasonal audio variations. I thanked them and invited them to experience the Lantern Festival planning meeting next week. ensuring they felt as invested in the winter vision as they had in autumn's beginnings. Finally, as the resort's lights twinkled around the lake's edge, I returned to my suite to prepare dinner for my parents. Roasted root vegetables and herb-crusted trout, a simple homage to the season's bounty. We ate by the window, watching mist rise again over the water. My mother leaned back. "This place," she said quietly, "feels like home." I poured a final glass of tea and smiled, knowing our journey, rooted in authenticity, fueled by shared stories and guided by respect, would continue to transform Lake Serene Resort into a haven of genuine connection. And as night deepened, I sat on the terrace one last time, the moon's reflection splintering across the gentle waves, content in the knowledge that each new season would bring its own story waiting to be told. The first snowfall of the season drifted down like feathered confetti, dusting the pines and roof lines of Lake Serene Resort in pristine white. I stood on the terrace of the presidential suite, wrapped in a cashmere wrap and woolen gloves, watching the flakes settle on the lake's glassy surface. The world felt hushed, as if holding its breath for winter's grand unveiling. For me, this moment marked not an ending, but a beginning. Our inaugural Lantern Festival was only 2 weeks away, and the resort buzzed with anticipation. That morning, I traded the warmth of the terrace for the glow of the hearth in the executive lounge. Oscar, Priya, Elise, and Matteo gathered around, tiki torch-style lanterns in hand, their faces lit by the fire's flicker. We sipped spiced cider and reviewed plans, pathways lined with hundreds of hand-painted lanterns, a floating lantern launch on the frozen lake, and an evening of storytelling by local elders. Elise displayed the festival map, each element designed to draw guests deeper into Lake Serene's magic. As she spoke, I felt that familiar thrill. The spark of collaboration ignited. "Let's ensure accessibility," I reminded the team. "Clear paths for all guests, heated tents for warming, and mobility assistance where needed." Their nods affirmed our shared commitment to inclusivity. I added, "And don't forget the lanterns for our staff. They deserve to be wrapped in the same wonder." A ripple of agreement passed through the group. Afterward, I retreated to the spa to experience the new forest bathing suite for myself. Steam curled into soft clouds as I reclined beside a window, overlooking snow-capped pines. The faint scent of pine and juniper soothed my mind, and I closed my eyes, letting the warmth seep into my bones. In the quiet, I reflected on the path I had walked, from the leaky cottage and understated check-in to this moment of serene leadership and heartfelt connection. Late that afternoon, I toured the lantern workshop where guests and staff had begun painting their own designs. Children dipped brushes into jade and gold paint, crafting scenes of evergreen boughs and dancing fireflies. Couples laboured over intricate patterns, laughter threading through the air. I paused to watch an elderly gentleman steady his hand as he etched a delicate snowflake into the paper. When he finished, he looked up and offered me a shy smile. "I've never done anything like this," he confessed. "It's harder than it looks." I bent to inspect his lantern. "But it's beautiful. You've captured winter's quiet grace." His grin of pride warmed me more than any hearth. As dusk fell, I returned to the lodge to finalise evening preparations. Priya and I walked the main paths, checking lantern placements against our map. She trailed a gloved finger along the snow to ensure the footprints of guests would not obscure the glow. At the ice rink, Oscar and Matteo tested the floating lanterns on a tray of melting ice, confirming that their reflective paper would not catch fire. Each careful detail affirmed our collective dedication. Finally, as the sky deepened to indigo, I stood on the frozen lake's edge, watching the first lantern. There's forms of cylindrical rice paper being set adrift on the ice. A hush fell over the assembled crowd, guests in parkas, staff in festive scarves, and a few familiar faces from my family reunion who had returned as friends. I pressed a candle into the lantern's base and whispered a silent wish for continued growth, deeper empathy, and ever-widening community. Then I released it. The lantern slid across the ice, its warm glow mirrored in the lake's glassy sheen. One by one, hundreds followed, each floating path weaving a luminous story across the frozen expanse. A local storyteller began to recite the legend of the winter's guiding light, an age-old tale of travellers guided home by lantern-bright stars. Voices hushed. I felt tears sting my cheeks, tears of gratitude for everyone who had believed in my vision and for the community we had built. When the final lantern drifted into place, I stepped back onto the snow and looked across the field of light. It was breathtaking, a tapestry woven of human creativity, shared stories, and the enduring spirit of Lake Serene. In that moment, I knew that every challenge, every risk, and every quiet moment of determination had led to this radiant celebration. As guests departed, wrapped in the glow of their lanterns and the promise of newly forged memories, I made my way back to the lodge. In the warmth of the hearth, guests warmed themselves by steaming cocoa and posed for photos beside flickering lantern displays. I paused to embrace each team member, Oscar, Priya, Matteo, Elise, offering heartfelt thanks for their unwavering support. Late that night, I returned to the presidential suite, brushing snow from my boots before stepping inside. I placed my own lantern, painted with a silver half-moon and forest roses, on the windowsill overlooking the luminous lake. It glowed softly, a private reminder of all that had transpired. As I slipped into bed, I reflected on the arc of this journey. From the young girl who folded linens at a bed and breakfast, to the CEO who orchestrated family reconciliations and winter festivals, I had grown into my true self. My story, like each lantern, had been guided by authenticity, hard work, and the courage to reveal my worth. And as I drifted into dreams beneath the hush of falling snow, I knew that Lake Serene Resort would continue to shine, a beacon of genuine hospitality and heartfelt connection for every guest who found their way here.